now, of course, part of the team at Laidlaw College. Dr. Samuel Carpenter joins us now. Kia ora, Sam. Thanks for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Morena.
And now, there's a lot of heat in these conversations, but let's, I suppose, try and shine more light than generate heat on it. A review of the Waitangi Tribunal, in and of itself, this is just the nature of, well, all aspects of governance. Is it doing the job it was designed for? Let's have a look at it. Let's taking the politics out of it for one moment. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
And indeed, I mean, obviously, people will say there are politics involved, and there probably are a range of politics around the cabinet table. But I think at this juncture in the tribunal's existence, it's been around since 1975, 1985.
Yeah.
We're nearing the end of looking at historic claims issues, treaty claims issues, and so it's probably about time there was a substantial review of what the tribunal's role is and how that can be defined moving forward.
Now, of course, Waitangi Tribunal is 50 years this year since it was founded. Any organisation, if you don't have a look at whether or not you're doing what you would hope to every 50 years or so, perhaps something wrong in that regard. This is a little bit political, of course, because it does involve our politicians, but interested in your thoughts on the makeup of the team that are appointed, the independent review panel. There certainly seems to be some wisdom and some balance in who's selected for that panel.
Yeah, well, the Minister Portaka, I believe, has appointed an independent review panel, which will report back. He says the government is keeping an open mind. Obviously, there will already be some views around that cabinet table, but there is an independent review panel, a KC, King's Council, a couple of senior Māori public servants, and so on. So it looks like a fairly balanced panel, and they will look at where the tribunal's at with its work and its work program moving forward.
And in some ways, the review panel, perhaps not dissimilar to the Waitangi Tribunal in itself, it can make recommendations, it can give advice, but in some ways it isn't given the mandate to substantially change what's happening with the Waitangi Tribunal.
Indeed. I mean, we've got to remember the tribunal is a creature of statute. It's a permanent commission of inquiry that's existed for 50 years, as you say.
Yeah.
And so its work is defined by statute, and it's I think it's important that as times change and as the work program changes, also the political system. A lot's changed in 50 years since 1975. If any listeners can remember 1975.
Yeah.
So we have come a long way in terms of a Māori voice within government in various ways. So it's probably timely to look at what the role of the tribunal is in terms of keeping the Crown accountable to the treaty on an ongoing basis, which actually is what it was doing in 1975. It didn't get a historic claims jurisdiction until 1985.
There certainly there are concerns in some sectors, politically and otherwise, that there may be some operational overreach, or what some would describe as a little bit of mission creep, in terms of some of the rulings, some of the reports from the Waitangi Tribunal have been quite a broad interpretation of the scope of the Waitangi Tribunal. Some concerns that things are going a little bit wide and not deep enough. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I don't have a really firm view on that. I think the tribunal, in the statute, it says that it must consider all claims of alleged treaty breach that prejudice Māori.
Mm-hmm.
It can then make recommendations to the Crown to remedy those breaches or those harms. And what seems to be happening more recently with the tribunal is it's sort of stepped away, or it's taken its focus exclusively off, not exclusively, but of the district hearings where it's considering historic issues, and it's looking at big picture current issues and even policy issues like the health system and so on. And I think there is a feeling that the tribunal wasn't set up as a policy shop for government. That is to make policy and to recommend systemic policy changes. That's one reading, I think, of some of the commentary I'm hearing.
Of course, after 50 years, a lot has changed in terms of the claims to the Waitangi Tribunal, and there's for many iwi, that process has completed, and then for others it is continuing. I suppose as we come to the end of this part of the tribunal, a time to review, okay, what has worked with some of the original treaty claims at a iwi by iwi basis, that aspect of it just about wrapping up, although some may take a few more years yet. Time to look at, hey, what next for the tribunal moving forward, perhaps?
Yes, and that work is wrapping up. The historic breaches from 1840 till, well, recent times, and so it's more about there are some bigger picture inquiries that are happening around, for example, Māori military veterans, a very interesting one, and the way that they were affected by, I guess, the Crown engagement and the big conflicts of the 20th century. So that there's some very interesting thematic or kaupapa inquiries, they call them, going on. It's where the some of those inquiries like health and so on, geothermal, water, they get into sort of big issues of policy, and there may be a feeling that that's not really where the tribunal first started. It was to look at discrete breaches or prejudice happening to Māori. Now, obviously, that is a systemic thing in many ways. It's the system that's producing not just, sort of particular egregious acts of government, but I think there's some sharpening, I think, that does need to happen around that.
Certainly some more conversations to have. Just wanting to also touch on the Auditor General's review of government agencies and this related issue, handling post-settlement obligations, the commitment of government to follow through, I suppose, at a departmental level. I mean, these are very much connected issues in some people's minds, although slightly different processes.
Yes, well, I mean, just basics for listeners. I mean, once the tribunal makes a recommendation to government, then the Office of Treaty Settlements, as it once was, then Te Arawhiti, will negotiate settlement. So we now have around, I think, 80 historic claim settlements with about 70 groups. So those obviously transfer some land. They make monetary payouts and so on, which are not so much compensation as just a reparation in some way. And then what happens after that is there's some ongoing obligations. That's particularly what this Auditor General report is about. It's saying, is the Crown dropping the ball with some ongoing obligations? The sort of thing is that comes up is that you have right of first refusal properties where Crown properties become surplus to requirements. There have been instances apparently where those have not been offered back like they should have been because there's been a glitch in the system. Someone hasn't monitored that properly. So it's those kind of monitoring obligations post-settlement that this Auditor General report is most focused on.
And that's an important aspect of it because this may be news to some people who think, oh yes, it's get some land back. Here's a cash payment, an apology from the Crown, and then moving on. But this is an ongoing relationship, ongoing obligations and commitments between the Crown and iwi.
Yeah, exactly right. And in many ways, what treaty settlements are doing is re-recognising iwi and hapu at central government level, at local government level, and vis-a-vis other Crown agencies. And so that ongoing partnership or ongoing relationship is very important, and I think is obviously what the treaty first envisaged. So, is getting that right. We have the Crown is a complex beast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a multi-headed monster in a sense. There's so many different parts to it, agencies, non-core agencies, and so these things get tricky, and monitoring them, I think, is obviously a work on for government at the moment.
And well, interesting headline on this particular one. I think one news agency described it as a scathing review from the Auditor General. What's your take on it? Perhaps, yes, could do better, but not necessarily a total fail in that regard.
Yeah, well, I actually just read an article before that sort of had a graphic F. They got a fail grade, F grade. But I don't think actually that's what the report was primarily doing. It only actually looked at the experiences of 3 groups, not the 70 groups. So, although it tried to look systemically at what was going on the Crown side, but I think it was more about needs to do better. We need better systems to monitor ongoing obligations and sort of more oversight across the board. So, I mean, obviously that is very important, but it wasn't you've failed, a big checklist of fails as such.
Hey, to me, it's encouraging that the review is being done, that we are investigating whether or not the systems are working and whether or not there's nefarious purposes and backroom discussions in terms of policy with the Waitangi Tribunal review. Certainly, I think 50 years on, Aotearoa New Zealand is in a better place because of the work that they've done, and we look forward to what happens in the future with the Waitangi Tribunal and figuring out their purpose for our nation, I suppose.
Yeah, totally agree. It's done a tremendous amount of work. It's led to 80 or so settlements covering most of the country now, and so iwi Māori are in a much better place than they were in 1975. We can be very sure of that.
Certainly. Sam, really appreciate your insight, your wisdom on this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Kia ora, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.